Good morning. Like Brooke said, my name is Sophie. I am a nurse. I live in Nampa. And when I was in 7th grade, I was sitting in a chapel service at school. I went to a Christian school. And I was listening to a missionary who worked in Africa. And I remember just knowing that I would live in Africa. I started telling people I'm going to raise my kids in a grass hut in Africa, and I just knew it. So I decided to go to nursing school so that I would have a gift to give to people in Africa. And after I graduated, the summer after I graduated from college, I spent 2.5 months in Ethiopia, in the capital of Addis Ababa. It has about 6 million people. I was training nannies in a couple different orphanages. Then I went back the next summer for a few weeks and just kind of followed up on that training, just made sure everything was going well. And then this last summer, I was down in southern Ethiopia, down in towns and villages. And my purpose there was to train nurses in a hospital, in a mission hospital. So anyway, that's a little bit of my background. This talk is going to be a lot about, like it says, life in Ethiopia, some of the everyday stuff, in addition to what I did and what I will be doing when I go back. So this last trip, like I said, I was supposed to be training nurses in a hospital, which I did. But the more fulfilling parts of my work were taking care of babies. I had one of the missionary wives in charge of orphanages in the area, and she takes some of the sickest and most traumatized babies into her home. And so I had the privilege of taking care of 4 of those babies. And I also got to work with a doctor her name is Dr. Mary Vanderkoy. She is about 70 years old. She's been in Ethiopia for 17 years. She also worked in Uganda before that. But she basically has a mobile medical clinic. She packs all of her medical supplies up in toolboxes and puts them in her car and then drives out to villages and offers free medical care to these people. And I got to go with her for 3 of her clinic days this summer. And the very first time she met me, we'd known each other for about 2 hours. She said, "Hey, just so you know, I'm trying to convince you to move here." I'm like, "Are you kidding? No, I'm not going to move here. I have other stuff that I'm doing in America right now, and I'll move sometime, but not now." She just smiled. And then throughout the summer, more and more missionaries kept saying, "You belong here. You're supposed to be here." And I just kind of shrugged it off. But toward the end of the summer, I was like, maybe it's a possibility. I love this place. I love these people. I know people here, and there are things I could do. So anyway, that was how the whole idea was introduced to me. So where I started, I live in Nampa. Flew from Boise over to Washington, D.C., and then we stopped over for an hour in Rome. We all stayed on the plane and then while they refueled, and then flew down into Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. And that flight altogether is about 17 hours. So this is all of Ethiopia. That square is where I spent most of my time, and this is the square. Addis Ababa is the one that has a big circle around it. Like I said, it's the capital, has 6 million people, and there are some rich people, but most of them are completely impoverished. The star in the middle is Sodo, which is where I lived. It's the town. And Arba Minch at the little circle at the bottom, that's just where I went for a weekend. So those are the 3 towns where I spent time. So Sodo is in a region called Walaita, and Walaita has about 3 million people. Sodo itself has about 50,000. These families live on less than $1 a day. They're mostly subsistence farmers, so they have their little plot of ground and they have their little grass hut, and they just do their thing every single day, same thing, day after day. Most of their crops are corn, lots and lots of corn, and they do quite a bit of ginger and teff, which is a grain that they use for their staple food, which is called injera. You'll hear more about that in a little bit. They also, each each family has their garden where they have all their vegetables and all that stuff. So this year, Ethiopia has 2 rainy seasons, one that's usually about 3 months long and one that's shorter, just a few weeks. And so usually they're able to get 3 different crops. This year, the long rainy season started about 2-3 weeks late. And so they planted their first crop and the rain didn't come, so they lost that first crop. They planted their second crop and it was beautiful, wonderful, everything worked out well. They planted their third crop and had torrential downpours for 2 weeks straight, so they lost that third crop too. So this year they are surviving on 1/3 of the food that they usually have, and even those 3 crops aren't enough. So right about now their food is starting to run out, so they're starting to starve. So here is a typical house. Way in the back behind that fence is, you can see the top of the house. And then their land, this one has 2 different crops. And their haystacks on the side. So you drive down the road and you see hundreds of these. This is one particular farmer in his field. You'll hear more about him in a little bit. This is market day. 1 day a week in every village they have set aside for market day. If anybody has anything extra, they bring it to the big open field or whatever where they have the market, spread it out on tarps. Sometimes they have little booths too. And people just come and they buy it. You barter back and forth. And it tends to work pretty well. And a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago I guess, the marketplace in Sodo, which is the town where I'm going to live, burned down. In the night, nobody really knows who did it or what happened. I guess it didn't have to be somebody. But so in addition to only having 1/3 of the food normal, they lost everything that was stored in the marketplace. It's a really desperate situation over there right now. Here's some shots around town. This is a taxi. They're pretty rickety. When I was going around town, I usually walked. But at the very end of my stay, I decided I was going to ride in one of these taxis. And I had a friend there with me this summer, too. Anyway, we got into the taxi and said we want to go to a particular place. Started going. We moved about 10 feet, and then we got to a little hill. The horse could not pull us up the hill. It was really embarrassing. So the taxi driver had to get out and actually push the horse up the hill. Like, they're not quite used to American weight. So this is Ethiopian Transport Company. If they want to get supplies from point A to point B, this is how they do it. No big semi-trucks for them. When you're driving down the road, you always see animals in the road, always. Oftentimes there are kids, even adults. You come up behind them, honk, 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 and they just hang out in the middle of the road. They don't care that you're coming. They expect that you're going to go around them. This is a very typical sight out in the countryside. After the donkeys have done their work and transported whatever it is they're transporting, they're headed back home with their people who tell them where to go, just chilling behind them.